The sun painted the Montana sky blood orange as Sarah Harrington pressed her trembling hand against the bullet wound in her side. Each shallow breath sending waves of white-hot pain through her body. The Blackwell Gang had taken everything: her father's ranch money, her dignity, and now possibly her life, leaving her crumpled against the weathered trunk of a cottonwood tree miles from civilization, as darkness threatened to engulf the rugged landscape of 1876 Montana territory. Sarah's vision blurred as she watched the gang disappear over the ridge, their laughter carrying on the wind like a cruel taunt. She had refused to tell them where her father had hidden the remainder of the cattle sale proceeds, even as they beat her, threatened her, and finally shot her when she tried to escape. The pain in her side pulsed with each heartbeat, warm blood seeping between her fingers as she fought to stay conscious. The sound of approaching hoofbeats jolted her from the edge of unconsciousness. Fear gripped her heart. Had they returned to finish what they started? With the last of her strength, Sarah dragged herself behind the thick trunk, leaving a crimson trail across the sun-baked earth. The hoofbeats slowed, and she heard the creak of saddle leather as someone dismounted. "Hello, is someone there?" a deep voice called out. Not the gruff bark of Silas Blackwell or his men. Sarah tried to respond, but her voice came out as little more than a whimper. Still, it was enough. Heavy boots crunched across the dirt, and suddenly a tall figure loomed above her. The setting sun silhouetted him against the darkening sky, his wide-brimmed hat and broad shoulders cutting an imposing figure. He dropped to his knees beside her, and Sarah caught her first glimpse of his face, ruggedly handsome with piercing blue eyes that widened with concern as they took in her bloodied form. "Good Lord," he breathed, immediately shrugging out of his coat. "What happened to you, miss?" "Blackwell Gang," Sarah managed, her voice barely audible. They took everything." His jaw tightened at the mention of the notorious outlaws. "I'm Yates Abernathy," he said, pressing his bandana firmly against her wound, "and I'm going to help you." Sarah's vision swam, darkness creeping in at the edges. "I don't think anyone can help me now." Yates leaned closer, his face set with fierce determination. "You'll heal in my arms or I'll bleed beside you," he said, his voice a solemn vow. "That's a promise, miss." As consciousness slipped away, Sarah thought she felt strong arms lifting her, cradling her against a solid chest. The last thing she remembered was the steady rhythm of a horse's hooves and the comforting beat of a heart against her cheek. When Sarah awoke, she was lying on a bed in an unfamiliar cabin. Sunlight streamed through a small window, illuminating dancing dust motes. She tried to sit up but gasped as pain lanced through her side. "Easy there," came that same deep voice. Yates appeared in her field of vision carrying a steaming cup. "You've been out for nearly 2 days. That bullet did a fair bit of damage." Sarah blinked, memories flooding back. "You saved me." "Found you just in time," he said, helping her sit up enough to sip from the cup a bitter herbal tea that made her grimace. "Medicine from the Crow tribe," he explained. "Not pleasant, but it'll help fight the fever." She studied him properly for the first time. Yates was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with sun-bronzed skin and a day's worth of stubble shadowing his strong jaw. His blue eyes held a gentle intelligence that contrasted with his rough exterior. "Why did you help me?" Sarah asked. "You don't know me." Yates settled into a chair beside the bed. "My pa taught me you never ride past someone in need. Besides," his expression darkened, "the Blackwell Gang has been terrorizing this territory for too long. Lost my best friend to them last winter." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "They killed my ranch hands, tried to make me tell where the money from our cattle sale was hidden." She swallowed hard. "My father died 3 months ago. The ranch was all I had left. Yates nodded solemnly. "The Flying H. I heard about John Harrington's passing. Good man from all accounts." "You knew my father only by reputation. Honest cattleman in a territory that doesn't have enough of them." He paused. "Miss Harrington, Sarah," she interrupted. "Please call me Sarah." A small smile touched his lips. "Sarah, I'm afraid your wound needs tending." He hesitated. "I did what I could when I brought you here, but—" Realizing what he meant, Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. The thought of this stranger tending to her while she was unconscious was mortifying, yet she was alive because of his care. "You've been a gentleman, Mr. Abernathy. I'm grateful." "Yates," he corrected, mirroring her earlier request. "And you needn't worry. Mrs. Caldwell from the neighboring homestead has been helping with your care. She's gone to fetch more supplies, but she'll be back by nightfall." Relief washed over Sarah, followed quickly by curiosity. "Is this your home?" Yates nodded. "Such as it is. I've been building it up these past 2 years." He gestured around the modest but well-constructed cabin. "It's part of a small spread I'm establishing. Nothing fancy, but it's mine." Over the next week, Sarah's strength slowly returned. The bullet had passed clean through her side, missing vital organs by mere inches. Mrs. Caldwell, a kindly widow in her 50s, came daily to help with Sarah's care. But it was Yates who was a constant presence, bringing food, changing her bandages with surprising gentleness, and keeping her company during the long hours of recovery. She learned he had been a cavalry scout during the war despite his young age, then a cowhand across several territories before settling in Montana. He spoke little of his past, but his knowledge of medicine, tracking, and survival suggested a life of varied experiences. One evening, as Sarah sat propped up in bed watching Yates prepare a simple supper, a question that had been nagging at her surfaced. "Why did you say it?" she asked. He glanced up from the pot he was stirring. "Say what? That I would heal in your arms or you would bleed beside me." Sarah's eyes met his. "That's a powerful promise to make to a stranger." Yates was silent for a long moment, his gaze returning to the stew. "My mother was killed by raiders when I was 12, he finally said. "Found her just like I found you, bleeding, alone. No one came to help her." He cleared his throat. "I guess I've spent my life trying to make that right, though I know I never can." The simple honesty of his answer touched Sarah deeply. "Thank you for not letting me die alone." His eyes, when they met hers again, held such intensity that her breath caught. "I wouldn't have." The atmosphere in the small cabin shifted, charged with something neither was ready to name. 2 weeks after Yates had found her, Sarah took her first steps outside the cabin. The mid-May sunshine warmed her face as she leaned against the porch railing, drinking in the view of rolling grassland and distant mountains. Yates stood beside her, ready to catch her if her strength failed. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It is," he agreed, though when she glanced at him, his eyes were fixed on her face rather than the landscape. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her injury. During her recovery, they had shared stories, meals, and quiet companionship. She'd come to know his dry humor, his principled nature, and the gentle way he cared for his horses. Somehow, this quiet cowboy had begun to matter to her in ways that went beyond gratitude. "I need to return to my ranch soon," she said, though the words lacked conviction. Yates's expression tightened. "The Blackwell Gang is still out there. I can't hide forever. That ranch is all I have left of my family." "At least wait until you're stronger," he urged. "Sheriff Donovan rode by yesterday while you were resting. He's gathering a posse to go after Blackwell and his men." Sarah turned to face him fully. "Did you tell him what happened to me?" Yates nodded. "He wants to speak with you when you're up to it. Your testimony could help bring them to justice. Will you join the posse?" The thought of him facing the dangerous outlaws sent a chill through her. "Someone needs to stay here with you," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. That evening, Sheriff Donovan visited, a grizzled veteran lawman with sharp eyes that missed nothing, including the protective way Yates hovered near Sarah as she gave her statement. "We'll get him, Miss Harrington," Donovan promised as he prepared to leave. "These men have terrorized good folks for too long." He paused at the door, glancing between her and Yates. "You're in good hands here. Abernathy's one of the finest men in the territory." After the sheriff departed, Sarah found herself unable to sleep, her mind churning with memories of the attack and worries about her ranch. She slipped from bed and made her way to the main room, where she found Yates still awake, cleaning his rifle by the dying embers of the fire. "You should be resting," he said without looking up. "I keep seeing their faces," she admitted, sinking into a chair across from him. "Every time I close my eyes." Yates set aside his rifle and moved to stoke the fire. The renewed flames cast dancing shadows across his troubled face. "After the war," he said slowly, "I couldn't sleep for seeing the men I'd killed, the ones I couldn't save." He looked up at her. "It gets better, not quickly, but it does." "How do you bear it?" "By remembering there's still good in the world worth fighting for." His eyes held hers. "Worth living for." The air between them seemed to thicken. Sarah was acutely aware of his proximity, of the way the firelight caught in his dark hair and illuminated the strong planes of his face. Without thinking, she reached out and laid her hand over his. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for saving my life, but for reminding me why it's worth living." Yates turned his hand to clasp hers, his calloused palm warm against her skin. For a long moment, neither spoke, connected by touch and the unspoken emotions swirling between them. Finally, he gently released her hand and stood. "You need to rest. Tomorrow, if you're feeling strong enough, I'll show you around the ranch." True to his word, the next day Yates helped Sarah onto a gentle mare and led her on a tour of his modest spread. 20 acres of good grazing land, a small but growing herd of cattle, and a creek that ran clear and sweet even in summer's heat. "It's not much compared to your father's ranch," he said as they paused beneath the shade of a cottonwood grove. "It's wonderful," Sarah replied honestly. "You've built something real here." Yates's expression turned thoughtful as he gazed across his land. "I never thought I'd settle down. After the war, I drifted for years. Couldn't seem to find a place that felt right." He glanced at her. "Then I came to this valley and something just clicked." "I understand. That's how I feel about my father's ranch." Sarah's voice softened. "Though I must admit, I've been dreading going back alone." "You don't have to be alone, Sarah." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities neither was bold enough to voice outright. Before Sarah could respond, the distant sound of approaching riders drew their attention. Yates immediately tensed, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Get behind me," he ordered, his relaxed demeanor vanishing in an instant. Sarah's heart pounded as 3 riders appeared on the ridge, but Yates relaxed as they drew closer. "It's Sheriff Donovan," he said, relief evident in his voice. The sheriff and his 2 deputies looked trail-worn and grim as they approached. They had pursued the Blackwell Gang for 4 days, finally catching up to them near the Wyoming border. "There was a shootout," Donovan explained, accepting the cup of coffee Sarah offered. "Silas Blackwell and 2 of his men are dead, the others scattered." He fixed his gaze on Sarah. "We recovered some money they had on them. Might be from your father's cattle sale." Hope surged through Sarah. "How much?" "About $800. Not sure if that's all of it." It wasn't the sale had brought nearly twice that amount, but it was enough to give her a fresh start. As the sheriff and his men departed, promising to deliver the recovered money once the bank could verify it. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Yet as she watched Yates thanking the lawman, a new weight settled in its place. With the immediate danger past and her strength returning, she had no reason to remain at his cabin. The thought of leaving brought an unexpected ache to her heart. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson, Sarah broke the silence that had grown between them throughout the day. "I should return to my ranch soon," she said softly. "See what's left, start rebuilding." Yates nodded, his face unreadable in the fading light. "I'll take you whenever you're ready. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You don't need to thank me." His voice was gruff. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "What if I don't want to go?" "At least not alone." Yates turned to her, surprise evident in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that these past weeks, despite the circumstances, have shown me something I never expected to find." Her voice trembled slightly. "I've come to care for you, Yates. More than I thought possible in such a short time." The silence that followed her confession seemed endless. Then, slowly, Yates reached for her hand, enveloping it in his larger one. "From the moment I found you," he said, his voice low and earnest, "something changed in me. The thought of you leaving." He shook his head. "Sarah, I don't have much to offer. This small ranch, a life that's bound to be hard work and struggle more often than not." "I'm no stranger to hard work," she replied, her heart pounding, "and a struggle shared is easier to bear." The look that passed between them held all the words they couldn't yet speak. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Yates leaned toward her. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes, a promise more binding than any words could be. The journey to Sarah's ranch 2 days later was tense with anticipation. She had no idea what they would find, whether the building still stood, whether any livestock remained. Yates rode beside her, solid and reassuring, his presence a comfort she had quickly come to rely on. As they crested the final ridge, Sarah gasped. The main house stood intact, though the door hung awkwardly on broken hinges. The barn had been partially burned, its charred beams stark against the blue sky. Of the 100 head of cattle her father had owned, she could see perhaps 20 grazing in the distance. "It could be worse," Yates said quietly. Sarah nodded, blinking back tears. "It can be rebuilt." They approached cautiously, Yates riding ahead to ensure no danger lurked. Finding the property deserted, they dismounted in the yard. Sarah stood for a long moment, taking in the place that had been her home for all of her 22 years. "The house seems structurally sound," Yates observed, examining the damaged door. "Mostly just vandalism inside, I'd wager." He was right. Though the interior had been ransacked, the damage was superficial: broken dishes, overturned furniture, personal items strewn about. Sarah moved through the rooms in a daze, memories of her childhood and her parents flooding back with each familiar sight. In her father's study, she knelt beside the large stone fireplace and carefully counted bricks from the bottom. Finding the one she sought, she pressed against it until it slid backward, revealing a small hidden compartment. "Pa's emergency fund," she explained to Yates, who watched from the doorway. She reached into the niche and withdrew a small metal box. Inside lay several $100s in notes and gold coins, the remainder of the cattle sale money her father had hidden before his death. "Smart man," Yates said approvingly. "He always said to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." Sarah closed the box, her resolve strengthening. "With this and what the sheriff recovered, I can start rebuilding." That evening they cleared enough debris to make the kitchen functional. Yates repaired the front door while Sarah salvaged what she could from the pantry. As darkness fell, they sat at the battered kitchen table sharing a simple meal, the glow of lamplight creating a small island of warmth in the damaged house. "It will take months to get the ranch back to working order," Sarah said, reality setting in as she assessed the enormity of the task ahead. Yates was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "What if we combined our efforts?" "What do you mean?" "Your ranch has more acreage, better water rights. Mine has a smaller but healthy herd that could be bred with your remaining stock." He met her eyes. "Together, we could build something stronger than either of us could alone." Sarah's heart quickened at the implication. "Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Abernathy?" A smile touched his lips. "I'm proposing whatever you're willing to consider, Miss Harrington." His hand found hers across the table. "I know it's fast. Too fast, maybe. But these past weeks have shown me what kind of woman you are, brave, resilient, kind despite everything you've endured." "And what kind of man are you?" she asked softly, though she already knew the answer in her heart. "A man who made you a promise when I found you bleeding under that tree." His voice deepened with emotion. "I said you'd heal in my arms or I'd bleed beside you. What I didn't say was that I never want to let you go." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "I don't want you to let me go." The kiss they shared then was different from their first, no longer tentative, but filled with certainty and promise. When they finally parted, both breathless, Yates pressed his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Sarah. Not tomorrow or next week, but when you're ready. Let's build something together, a ranch, a home, a life." "Yes," she whispered without hesitation. "Yes." The months that followed were filled with backbreaking work and countless challenges as they combined their ranches and resources. Yates moved his cattle to Sarah's land while they worked to repair the damaged buildings. News of their partnership and their engagement spread quickly through the territory, bringing offers of help from neighbors and friends. Sheriff Donovan delivered the promised money, and the welcome news that the remaining members of the Blackwell Gang had been captured or driven from the territory. Sarah testified at their trial in Helena, Yates steadfast at her side as she faced the men who had nearly taken her life. By autumn, the ranch house was fully restored, the barn rebuilt stronger than before, and their combined herds thriving on the rich grassland. On a crisp October day, with the aspens blazing gold against the mountainsides, Sarah Harrington became Sarah Abernathy. In a small ceremony attended by the handful of friends they counted in the territory. That night, as they stood on the porch of their home watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Yates wrapped his arms around his bride from behind, drawing her against his chest. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. Sarah leaned into his embrace, her hands covering his. "More than I ever thought possible." She turned in his arms to face him. "I never expected to find love when I was bleeding under that tree, but you kept your promise. I healed in your arms. And I would have bled beside you if you hadn't," he said solemnly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's a vow I'll always keep." "I know," Sarah said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, "but I prefer the healing." As winter settled over the Montana landscape, Sarah and Yates found a rhythm to their shared life. The days were filled with the endless tasks of maintaining a working ranch, the nights with quiet conversations by the fire and the deepening bond between them. What had begun in violence and pain had transformed into something beautiful, and enduring a love forged in the crucible of adversity and strengthened by shared dreams. Spring brought new calves to their growing herd, and the news that their family would expand as well. When Sarah placed Yates's hand against her still flat stomach one evening, his expression of wonder and joy was something she would treasure always. "A child," he breathed, looking at her with eyes shining with unshed tears. "Our child." "The beginning of our legacy," Sarah agreed, her heart full to bursting. As summer returned to the Montana Territory, painting the landscape in vibrant greens and wildflower blooms, Sarah often thought back to that fateful day beneath the cottonwood tree. The path that had led her to this life, to this love, had begun in blood and terror, yet had flowered into something more precious than she could have imagined. Standing in the doorway of their home, watching Yates return from the pastures, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun, Sarah placed a hand over her growing belly and smiled. From the darkest moment of her life had come its greatest blessing, a man who had promised she would heal in his arms or he would bleed beside her, and who had given her not just healing but a future filled with love, purpose, and hope. In the vast wilderness of the Montana Territory, Sarah and Yates Abernathy had found in each other not just survival, but the rarest of gifts. A love strong enough to weather any storm and tender enough to heal the deepest wounds, a love as wild, enduring, and true as the frontier itself.